It appears the building department has placed a requirement for ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI, protection on all outlets in your garage. However, the code section 210.8.2 potentially excludes garages that are 6 inches or more above grade from this blanket requirement. To address the situation, it's recommended to communicate with the building department. Contact them either by phone or email and clearly explain that you've reviewed the applicable electrical code and believe the GFCI requirement for all your garage outlets may not be necessary due to your garage's elevation. Provide a copy of code section 210.8.2 as evidence to support your claim. Having the specific code language readily available will strengthen your case. If, after your initial contact, the building department remains unwilling to remove the requirement, it is reasonable to request a discussion with a supervisor or a senior inspector. Explain your understanding of the code and why you believe it applies to your situation. Be prepared to answer any questions they may have regarding your garage's construction and elevation. As an additional measure, consider seeking a second opinion from a licensed electrician. A qualified electrician can review your garage setup and provide a professional interpretation of the code, which can further support your argument with the building department. The electrician can assess your specific circumstances and offer an expert opinion on whether GFCI protection is truly required for all your outlets. This approach helps ensure code compliance while potentially avoiding unnecessary work and expenses. By proactively addressing this issue with the building department and possibly seeking professional guidance, you may be able to resolve the discrepancy and save time and money on unnecessary rewiring. This process ensures that all parties understand the applicable code requirements and that the final outcome aligns with both safety standards and regulatory compliance. The aim is to foster a clear understanding and reach a mutually agreeable solution that benefits both the homeowner and the building department. Remember that clear communication and a thorough understanding of the electrical code are key to resolving such discrepancies effectively. The specific section of the National Electrical Code, or NEC, that is relevant here is 210.8.2. This section deals with ground fault circuit interrupter protection for personnel in dwelling units. It outlines specific locations where GFCI protection is required for 125 volt, 15 and 20 amp receptacles. The NEC is a comprehensive set of standards and guidelines for safe electrical installations. It is updated every 3 years to reflect advancements in technology and address emerging safety concerns. Understanding and adhering to the NEC is crucial for ensuring electrical safety in residential, commercial, and industrial settings. Section 210.8 specifically focuses on GFCI protection, which is designed to protect people from electric shock. A GFCI is a device that monitors the current flowing through a circuit and quickly interrupts the power if it detects any leakage current, which could indicate a ground fault. Ground faults occur when electricity flows through an unintended path, such as through a person's body. GFCI protection is particularly important in areas where there is a higher risk of electric shock, such as wet or damp locations. The specific requirement in 210.8.2 addresses GFCI protection in garages. However, there is an exception for garages that are at or above grade level. If the garage floor is at least 6 inches above the adjacent grade level, GFCI protection may not be required for all receptacles. This exception is based on the assumption that the risk of moisture and ground faults is lower in garages that are elevated above the surrounding ground. To determine whether the exception applies to your garage, you need to measure the height of the garage floor above the adjacent grade level. If the floor is 6 inches or more above grade, you may be able to argue that GFCI protection is not required for all receptacles. However, it is important to note that the local building department has the final authority to interpret and enforce the NEC. They may have specific interpretations or amendments to the code that affect the GFCI requirements in your area. Therefore, it is crucial to communicate with the building department and understand their specific requirements. In addition to Section 210.8.2, there may be other relevant sections of the NEC that apply to your garage. For example, Section 210.11 specifies the branch circuit requirements for dwelling units. including garages. This section outlines the number and type of circuits that are required for lighting receptacles and other loads in the garage. Section 210.12 addresses arc fault circuit interrupter, or exclude, protection, which is designed to protect against electrical fires caused by arcing faults. An exclude is a device that detects arcing conditions in a circuit and quickly interrupts the power. Exclude protection is typically required for branch circuits that supply receptacles and dwelling units, including garages. When working with electrical systems, it is important to follow all applicable safety precautions. Always turn off the power to the circuit before working on any electrical components. Use insulated tools and wear appropriate personal protective equipment, such as safety glasses and gloves. If you are not comfortable working with electricity, it is best to hire a qualified electrician to perform the work. Working with electricity can be dangerous, and it is important to take all necessary precautions to avoid electric shock or other injuries. In addition to the NEC, there may be other applicable codes and standards that you need to follow. For example, your local building codes may have specific requirements for electrical installations in garages. It is important to research and understand all applicable codes and standards before starting any electrical work. If you have any questions or concerns about electrical safety, it is always best to consult with a qualified electrician or electrical inspector. They can provide expert advice and guidance to ensure that your electrical system is safe and compliant with all applicable codes and standards. When communicating with the building department, it is important to be polite and professional. Explain your situation clearly and provide all relevant information. Be prepared to answer any questions they may have and be willing to work with them to find a solution that meets their requirements. Remember that the building department is responsible for ensuring the safety of the public, and they may have legitimate reasons for requiring GFCI protection in your garage. However, if you believe that the requirement is not necessary based on the applicable codes and standards, you have the right to appeal their decision. The appeals process may vary depending on your local jurisdiction. You may need to submit a written appeal to the building department or attend a hearing to present your case. Be prepared to provide evidence to support your claim, such as copies of the relevant code sections and photographs of your garage. If you are not successful in your appeal, you may need to comply with the building department's requirements and install GFCI protection for all receptacles in your garage. However, you may be able to negotiate with the building department to find a more cost-effective solution. For example, you may be able to install GFCI protection only for the receptacles that are located near water sources or in other areas where there is a higher risk of electric shock. Ultimately, the goal is to ensure the safety of your electrical system while minimizing the cost and inconvenience of complying with the building department's requirements. Communication and collaboration are key to achieving this goal. Let's delve deeper into the technical aspects of ground fault circuit interrupters. A GFCI is a safety device designed to protect people from electric shock. It works by monitoring the current flowing through a circuit. In a typical electrical circuit, the current flows from the power source through the load and back to the power source. The amount of current flowing out should be equal to the amount of current flowing back. However, if there is a ground fault, some of the current may flow through an unintended path, such as through a person's body. A GFCI detects this imbalance in current and quickly interrupts the power to the circuit. GFCIs are designed to trip very quickly, typically within a fraction of a second. This rapid response time can prevent serious injury or even death from electric shock. GFCIs are available in several different types, including receptacle type, circuit breaker type, and portable type. Receptacle type GFCIs are designed to replace standard electrical receptacles. They have a built-in GFCI that protects the receptacle itself and any other receptacles that are wired downstream from it. Circuit breaker type GFCIs are designed to replace standard circuit breakers in an electrical panel. They provide GFCI protection for the entire circuit that they are connected to. Portable type GFCIs are designed to be plugged into a standard electrical receptacle. They provide GFCI protection for any ubiquitor that is plugged into them. When choosing a GFCI, it is important to select the appropriate type for the application. Receptacle type GFCIs are typically used in residential settings, while circuit breaker type GFCIs are often used in commercial and industrial settings. Portable type GFCIs are useful for temporary applications where GFCI protection is needed. GFCIs should be tested regularly to ensure that they are functioning properly. Most GFCIs have a test button that can be used to simulate a ground fault. When the test button is pressed, the GFCI should trip and interrupt the power to the circuit. If the GFCI does not trip when the test button is pressed, it may be defective and should be replaced. GFCIs are an important safety device that can help protect people from electric shock. They are required in many areas of the home and workplace, particularly in locations where there is a higher risk of moisture or water. By understanding how GFCIs work and using them properly, you can help prevent electrical injuries and save lives. Now let's discuss the specific requirements for GFCI protection in garages according to the National Electrical Code (NEC). As mentioned earlier, Section 210.8 A2 of the NEC addresses GFCI protection in dwelling units, including garages. This section requires GFCI protection for all 125-volt, 15 and 20 amp receptacles installed in garages. However, there is an exception for receptacles that are not readily accessible. A receptacle is considered readily accessible if it is capable of being reached quickly for operation, renewal, or inspections without requiring those to whom ready access is requisite to climb over or remove obstacles or to resort to portable ladders, and so forth. If a receptacle is not readily accessible, GFCI protection is not required. Another exception to the GFCI requirement in garages is for receptacles that supply only a dedicated appliance, such as a refrigerator or freezer. If the receptacle is specifically designed for a single appliance and is not used for any other purpose, GFCI protection is not required. However, it is important to note that the local building department may have specific interpretations or amendments to the NEC that affect the GFCI requirements in your area. They may require GFCI protection for all receptacles in garages, regardless of their accessibility or intended use. Therefore, it is crucial to communicate with the building department and understand their specific requirements. In addition to the NEC requirements, there may be other factors that you should consider when deciding whether to install GFCI protection in your garage. For example, if you frequently use power tools or other electrical equipment in your garage, GFCI protection can help protect you from electric shock. Even if the NEC does not require GFCI protection for all receptacles in your garage, it may still be a good idea to install it for added safety. When installing GFCI receptacles, it is important to follow all applicable electrical codes and standards. Use insulated tools and wear appropriate personal protective equipment. If you are not comfortable working with electricity, it is best to hire a qualified electrician to perform the work. Working with electricity can be dangerous, and it is important to take all necessary precautions to avoid electric shock or other injuries. By understanding the NEC requirements for GFCI protection in garages and taking appropriate safety precautions, you can help ensure the safety of your electrical system and protect yourself and your family from electric shock.